Hey everybody, welcome back to the Decimal Works channel, and today we are back on with the 848 engine, and as I said in the last video, we'll be sticking this back together. So first part I'm going to be doing is getting the clearances correct for the end float for both of the gear shafts and the preload measurement for the crankshaft. So if I just show where we're at the moment, so I've dropped in the crankshaft. On here is two 1.9mm shims, because we have to calculate a preload of 0.30. I've got the original shims that were on the gear cluster from when the engine came apart, so hopefully I don't need any change in there. And then I've got the bolts lined up so that we can put the cases together. So all I'm going to do, drop the cases on without any free bond. We'll torque the cases down to their operating setting, and then we're going to measure the free float that will be in the crankshaft, and that will help us determine the right measurement of shims and preload that we need, and then we'll just check what free float we have on each of these shafts. Okay, let's do this. Stage 1, 19 newton meters. Then 25. Okay, so much as I've done in other videos where we've been setting up the crank preload, I put in the metal carrier from the alternator removal tool because it just gives me a magnetic base for the dial gauge. That's now reading on the top of the crankshaft. All I'm going to do, just going to get a bar and just leverage that up and check the measurement on there. Okay, so you'll see that the dial gauge is reading 0.25mm of free play. So we need to add that measurement to the total shim stack, plus then add 0.3 for preload. So in effect, we want to add 0.55 to the existing shims, which total 3.8, because I've got 1.9 on each side. So we need 4.35. Okay, so that's preload calculated for the crankshaft. Let's just go and check the free float on the gearbox shaft. Okay, so gearbox is ready to be measured for end float, and you see we've got 0.2, and ideally we wanted a maximum of 0.15, so we'll just have to check and see if we can shim that up. Let me flip over the engine and we'll check the float on the clutch shaft. Okay, so we're now set up for the clutch shaft. It's just roughly zeroed off, so if we pull that up, 0.25. So we need to try and take out about 0.1 on this side as well. So we've got 0.2 and 0.25. Okay, let me strip this apart and let's get the right shims for the crank and hopefully for the gearboxes. So just to confirm, 3.8, and if you remember we needed to add 0.55 to the shim stack. So we're going to need 4.35. Which is just shy of what the original shims were, so we're going to stick those back in. Right, so we had 0.2 on here, so we need it between 0 and 0.15. 0.8. Right, 0.9. So that sorts that shim out. Right, that one is 1.2. We really need a 1.3 shim. Okay, so I've had to change the big shim on this side from a 1.6 to a 1.9. Then I changed this original shim here from a 1.2 to a 1. So hopefully that will put us in a position where the end float has had 0.1 taken off of this side, and I've managed to take 0.1 off of this side. So hopefully we're within spec now. And this crank is now preloaded to 0.25. So just off the 0.3, but it'll be perfectly right enough as that. Let's get it all back together and test again. So roughly at about 0.14 on that shaft, so spot on. Shouldn't be any movement in the crank at all, so just going to put that there. Yeah, that's solid and preloaded correct. Okay, and this one we've brought back into being on 0.15, so it's right at the end of the service limit, but that's acceptable. Preload done on the crank, so we put in initially 1.9 shims on each side. That gave us a float of 0.25. We added 0.3 of preload to that, so we needed to take the total shim stack from 3.8 to 4.35, and I found a set that were 4.32. They've gone in there. We had 0.25 on this is now down to 0.15, and we had 0.2 on the output shaft for the gearbox, and we've got that down to 0.1. So floats are correct on the gearboxes, preloads correct on the crank. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stick the timing shaft in, and that is ready to be sealed up. Okay, let's do that then. Make sure seal's in there. £19 first off. £25 all the smaller bolts 10 Nm. So that's the cases all bolted together now. What I'm going to do is stick the starter motor on, and then we can just drop the cases into the box to do the rest of the build up. D10 spring bolt, 30 newton meters. Okay, so assembly of the clutch side of the engine. So we're going to fit the primary drive gear first loosely. I'll talk that up later. And then we're going to fit the oil pump in and then get the primary gear and clutch assembly mounted. Okay, let's do this. $25, $10, needs to be done up to 190 newton meters. I've just jammed it against the the primary gear, so just means I can put some torque on that. Okay, that was slightly hard to do. I had to put it on the floor and wedge the case against the piece there. 190 newton meters. And the bit I'm worried about is the tool that you use has these prongs, so I was trying to make sure that I had my weight against the torque wrench so it stayed nice and square and flat, because it had this habit of wanting to twist, and what I didn't want to do is have the teeth tear themselves off. So 190 newton meters, that's all tightened up. Then newton meters, clutch cover time, make sure that seal's there. Okay, flip it up on its side and we'll get the cylinders and heads onto it. It's marked as top inlet. Just make sure we've got enough. Just make sure we've got enough juice everywhere. Stage 1, 20, then 40, and then 60. All good. Horizontal head on. Twenty, 40, 60. Okay, heads on. Let's build up the alternator side of the engine then. So first thing we need to do is get the selector fork in. New washer. $55. Now bend the tab washer over. Look for the little timing pin. Need to align that with that. So a little pin mark is lined up with that hole, so that's the timing correct. Just lined up that mark with the keyway when sticking it on. $330 Newton meters. Okay, last job on this side is to put the alternator cover on and seal this side of the engine up. So let's grab that. There we have it. Engine is back together. However, you will have noticed, I'll just move some of these tools out of the way so I can spin the engine around. The keen-eyed of you will notice that I've not done the belts yet. That's because I am missing one of the adjustable pulleys. Sorry, it was this one here. So I've got the two fixed. I've got the horizontal one. I've not got the vertical one. It appears that when he supplied the head to me, the replacement head, he hasn't given me the other adjustable pulley, so I just need to go back to the owner and ask him to drop that by. But I was going to do the belts as a separate video anyway. So that is 848 engine rebuilt, seized vertical head replaced with a second-hand replacement unit supplied by the owner. Engine will go back once the belts have been done. He's got all of the oil line pipe bits and pieces. you'll notice as I turn it round we're missing things like some of the hoses etc. that are missing from here. That's down to the owner to resolve. Don't have a clutch slave cylinder on there. Cleaned up the gearbox sprocket for him. Oh, it's in gear as well. Should have really I'll take that out of gear in a second. So there we go, 848 engine all built up. There we go, 848 build finished and done. As I said, timing belts will be the next video on the 848 engine. If you'd enjoyed that video, chuck us a like. Any questions or comments, stick them down below. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and notification bell for more content. Thanks for watching, see you at the next video. Cheers, bye.